What am I doing outside a shoe shop on Cheapside in the city of London, number 90 Cheapside, in fact? Well, look a bit further and you will see that this is the place where Thomas Becket was born. Now, who is Thomas Becket? He became the most famous saint in England, really, for hundreds of years. He was buried in Canterbury, where there is a shrine to him. And the Canterbury Tales, all of those pilgrims are going to Canterbury to visit the shrine of Thomas Becket, the one who was born round about here in 1120. His father was an alderman. That meant he had some status within the city because he was a merchant, but he wasn't noble at all. And Thomas Becket, I don't think, was ever allowed to forget that as he rose up through the ranks. He was clearly quite smart. He went off to university in the Sorbonne, I think, in Paris, and then he had to come back because I think his father's business was in trouble. Again, I say I think because we don't have that many written records for this part of his life, and I guess it wasn't in anyone's interest for him to write about these and accentuate his low-born status, which back then was not considered to be a plus. So he served Archbishop Theobald, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and then switched into the king's household, where he became the Chancellor, the right-hand man of the king, a bit like Joseph in Egypt being the right-hand man of the Pharaoh. And so there he was, an excellent administrator and also friend and companion to the king. And they had this very strange and uneasy relationship, though, because then when Henry II had this wonderful idea of making his old pal, literally old, he was older than him, old pal Thomas Becket, Archbishop of Canterbury, suddenly Becket's allegiances seemed to switch. And there's a lot of debate about why that happened. And I've been very interested in it, partly because I've been writing a musical about the life of Thomas Becket and his death and his murder, because the fallout was so bad. He was murdered in Canterbury Cathedral by 4 knights who apparently were acting on the will of the king, who said, "Who will rid me of this turbulent priest?" And they thought, "Oh yeah, we know what to do. We'll go off and get rid of him." Henry II was mortified by this, or at least appeared to be, and did penance barefoot through the streets of Canterbury and allowed the monks of the priory at Canterbury to lash him for penance. It's an extraordinary story, and it all began here on the day of St. Thomas the Apostle. He was named after Thomas the Apostle because that's the day he was born. And what's incredible is that he then eclipses St. Thomas the Apostle as being the premier saint in England for hundreds of years until Henry VIII comes along, at which point he doesn't want a famous Thomas who stood up for the ancient rights of the church, because Henry VIII wants to be the head of the church himself. And so it doesn't do him any good to let all these Thomas Becket fans running around the place. So the tomb and the shrine is desecrated and removed. I think a lot of churches also changed their dedication away from St. Thomas Becket. So that's why he then is slightly forgotten, as it were, although for hundreds of years he was an absolute rock star in terms of name and brand for being the king, for being the servant and the archbishop who stood up to the king. And it starts here in Cheapside near Ironmongery Lane, and I find the story really interesting, and so I'll be making some more videos about this as we go. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.